Good afternoon all, hope you're having a lovely weekend. It's been a weird old week, hasn't it? Loads of changes for us again and the start of a long winter, I think. But hopefully us here in the Stamps by Me studio, me, Tony and Carly, can be bringing you some inspiration and some fun things to watch and keep you busy if we're all going to be inside a little bit more. So if you haven't tuned into my shows before, I'm Claire Manning from Thirsty Brush, and I'm here on a Thursday live at 1 p.m. and then this show on a Sunday at 1 p.m. Which is pre-recorded, but again I will be available on the comments below, so do leave me a message and let me know what you think, or if there's something that you'd like to see, a Thirsty Brush design or a technique, I'll be happy to incorporate that in my videos. So while you're here as well, do subscribe to Tony's Stamps by Me channel, hit the bell and you'll get notified of all our videos from me, Tony and Carly doing Guymala videos as well. And also subscribe to my own channel, Claire Manning Craft, which is just dedicated to Thirsty Brush and watercolouring videos I do. And we're going to be doing a little bit of watercolouring today in a card that we're going to make. So let me explain what we're going to do. So I really like doing cards where we pretty much start off with just a blank canvas and some white card and see what we can create out of that really. So I'm going to be using this set here, which is A Hug for You. And this was one from, I think, 2019. And a die set, which is an embossing die set. We're going to use this watering can. So we're going to literally start off with some completely blank white paper, do some stamping, and then these embossing dies we're going to colour up with some watercolour as well, and see what kind of texture and effects that we can get just adding colour onto white card and a bit of die cutting. So let's start off. I'm just going to do some basic stamping first with some black ink. So this is a great, if you haven't done much stamping before, this is a great place to start off, is if you have a stamping tool or acrylic blocks, just get some white card and stamp out a few images in some black ink, and then we can talk through what options you've got for your colouring. So I've got an A5 piece of white card here, and I'm going to use some of these flowers that I'm going to put in the watering can that we'll do a little bit later on, but I wanted to get all the stamping done first. So I'm going to use this sunflower one here, the leaf, so those can go in my watering can, and I want a sentiment to put on my card as well, so I may as well stamp and die cut all this out all at the same time. So I'm just using a black ink that is water resistant. So this is VersaFine Onyx Black. So this means that when I use my water-based paints that I'm going to show you in a little while, they're not going to smudge using this ink. So I'm just going to go over again, just that little middle bit there, everything else is stamped perfectly crisp, just an extra bit of ink in that middle of that sunflower. And this is where stamping tools are really great, aren't they, that you can go in and just make things that little bit crisper. So that's that ready. Just give my stamp a wipe. And back on the carrier sheet. That one there. Okay, and before I even colour those up with anything, I'm going to die cut them straight out using the coordinating dies that come in the Hug for You set. So no fussy cutting, all that intricate leaves and petals. We can just go straight in. I'll show you the dies that come with the set. So you have an outline and a matte layer, if you like, for each of the flowers. There's like a tulip and the sunflower. We have an outline and matte layer for the leaves, so that one and that one we need, don't we? And this is for the sentiments, so again an outline and matte layer, and I'm going to cut both of those out. I'm not going to use the matte layers on this particular card for those bits, but it's nice that you have those options there. It means that you can make a bigger variety of types of card and different levels of dimension if you want to. Look particularly great with, you know, black matte layer or metallic glitter card, that kind of thing. So just using some low tack tape to line that up and hold that in place. The leaves, you've got those holes so you can line them up really easily. As long as I can see all the leaves there, that should come out pretty straight. You get nice 1mm border on the majority of our coordinating dies. So the outline for the sentiment, and then another one that's just going to be plain white behind, so I'm going to do a white on white layer behind that. Just run that through the die cutting machine. So I hope everybody's had a good week. It's been a strange one weather-wise as well, hasn't it? It started off really warm and sunny and then ended rainy and cold, just like we're going into winter. The woolly jumpers will be out. I haven't put my heating on yet though, I've resisted. Just keep telling the kids to just put more layers on for now. So now if I remove that low tack tape, those just pop out really nice and easily, ready for us to colour. I do sometimes do the colouring before as well. Depends on the type of image, whether I need to move it round a lot. Pens I tend to colour before and then die cut. Paints, if you're doing it quite loose, it doesn't matter so much. So the sentiment can just go aside for now. That will be one of the last things that we put on the card. And that matte layer that goes behind it, so just pop that aside for now. Get rid of the rubbish and those dies out the way. Right then, so to colour up these two images here, I'm using some watercolour paints here, and a few of you have asked me already on previous videos where this one is from and what paints they are, and they are something that's coming to us at Thirsty Brush. So I know that's a bit of a tease and I can't give you any more information yet about the release date and prices and things like that, but there will be different size palettes. This is the largest one, the 36, but there will be smaller ones available as well. So sorry to tease, but the reason that I've been using it on some videos, even though it's not available yet, is to test it out for you guys and make sure that it does give the effects that I want. So I've mixed up here just one of the oranges and a yellow with a bit of orange in as well. So I'm very, very quickly and very simply just going to put some yellow all over these petals. I'm going to do a little section at a time, and then let's go in with some of the orange, quite not as watered down maybe, and then see if we can get a bit of to give the illusion of light and shade. We're not really worrying too much about which area the light's coming from or anything like that, but I just want those petals to look orangier and darker near the centre, and then lighter and more yellowy towards the edge. So a little section at a time. And I'm keeping in the lines around the edge, but you can see I'm doing more than one petal at a time, and that's because the ink doesn't smudge. I don't need to worry about really colouring within the lines there. Adding a bit of orange to those ones in the background as well, and it looks like a bit more depth then for those. That water needs a good change, I think, doesn't it? But it's doing okay. We're not using huge amounts of water here, so it's not muddying it down. They're really nice creamy watercolours, these, that can give you quite vibrant, intense colour, but can also be watered right down to give you a more subtle look. So great for painting your flowers. Because watercolour dries back a little bit lighter, you can always go back in and add more intense colour. Right, let's brighten up that orange a little bit, right near the centre. And in those ones in the background maybe. And again, just gives that extra little bit of depth. Don't give yourself too much of a hard time if this is the first time you're using things like watercolours when you watch these videos. You know, just add some flat colour on to start off with, and then just start playing around. And each time you use them, you will just get better and better. That's all the yellow down. And then when I think about a sunflower, I always think the centres are like browns and blacks, all that kind of, not completely black, so you don't want to lose the detail that you've got there, the hand-drawn detail. And you'll notice there's old bits of colour in here, so rather than clean that off, that reddish, I'm just going to add some browns to it until it's the right kind of colour, because it's of a similar tone. Brown is very red based, red and green together, isn't it? So that should work for me. And there's already those little dots there as well to give you that extra look of light and shade. Tiny bit of green for the stalk. Use two little greens here. This one's like a browny green, just to give a little bit of shade. And then just onto the leaves. So again, I'm going to use the same green so it ties in nicely. Make it a little bit darker in areas, but because you've got these lovely lines in the design, you don't need to do too much. But we can make it a bit darker, say at the base of the leaves going into the lighter, but very, very loose. A little bit of water then on my brush just to blend it out. Okay, so those are ready to go in the watering can, so let's get that watering can ready, and we'll come back to our paints and add some colour to the watering can in a moment. So this die set that I was showing you for the watering can, let me explain how they work in case you haven't seen these before. because again, I try and give you as many options as possible to use these dies, so you won't necessarily use all of them in this card, but it gives you more options and more, what's the word? Just more scope to be able to create different looks. So they are layering embossing dies, so you've got the little stack of plant pots, so you've got 3 with an outline if you want it, and then you can layer on for 2 pots, you can layer on for 1 pot, you can use them all separate, and it's got a cut line here for you to be able to poke in your flowers. So I'm using the flowers from a set that we launched at the same time, but I bet you've got lots of flowers that are a similar size to that, kind of between 2 and 3 centimetres, that would work. And then the watering can is very similar. You've got your outline, you've got your cut line, and then you've got 2 layers. So this middle bit and the spout pop out. So that's the bit I'm going to use, not the outline, but the 3 layers of the watering can. So again, because we're sticking to just white card for today and then adding the colour ourselves, I'm just going to run that through the machine. Don't really need to hold it down with anything this time because it's just a plain piece of card. Now that's going to cut and give you the embossed detail with just 1 pass. If you want the embossed lines deeper, you can cut and then redo it through with your spongy embossing mat that comes with your die cutting machines. It'd be different depending on which machine you have. But I find that you get a good emboss anyway, just running it through on the cut. So there we go, that's our 3 pieces. And if you can see there we go, you can see the embossed detail already on there, and that's going to pop out even more when we add some colour. But this looks great, in particular this watering can, if you cut it out of like silver mirror card, because it just looks like one of those stainless steel watering cans before you've even done anything. But let's add in some kind of greys, browns, that kind of thing. I've got on my palette here, and this is why I never clean my palette off after using and making a particular project, because normally you can just wet something back up again, and that's like a bluey grey. Let's test it on another piece maybe, just to see whether it's the right kind of colour that I'm after. Oh, I'm pretty happy with that, but let's make it a tiny bit darker, just so on the camera it stands out a little bit more. Maybe a little bit of brown in there. Kind of want it to look like that. It's metal, but it's a bit rusty at the same time. Lovely. And then we can always obviously add more water onto the light and shade. And it embosses these little lines in there, so you can see where the shading would be. So I'm going to go down the side. I'm just going to give it some curve by adding a little bit more water to my brush and just kind of blending out. Really, really basic. You know, this isn't about creating a masterpiece of watercolouring. It's about just getting some basic light and shade. And while it's wet, you can add some extra colour. Don't need to worry too much about some of these bits because they're going to have layered, but I don't want them to look white either if you look at the card from an angle or anything. You can even let this layer dry and go back in and add more layers, more depth obviously depending on how much time you've got to spend on your card. I always think that looks really good with watercolours if you go in and do more detail and more layers. Bit of shade there underneath the spout. Okay, and then the other two layers. So do a quick wash all over, and then I'll go in and add, while it's still wet, and add a bit more detail on these smaller bits. It's just easier. If you feel like a bit's gone a bit dark like there, just clean your brush and just blend it out a bit. And you can even do something like, if you've got a bit of kitchen roll or something, if you feel like you've got a bit too much, you can dab and it will just pick it up while it's still wet. Okay, I think that'll do for now. Again, you can always go in more browns, more greys, build it up. Obviously, you'll have more time than me to make it look exactly as you want. So while that's drying, I want to build a background for that watering can and the flowers to sit on. So lots of you may have and recognise this die, which was an embossing die we did very, very early on in the first 12 months of Thirsty Brush. And it gives this kind of embossed wood panel. Can you see there the detail on there? So it cuts in using this outline. So it's going to give us like an A6 size panel to sit behind the flower and the watering can. So again, I'm seeing how much texture, colour and dimension we can get from just using white card. So the reason that it's in two pieces is that you can use just the texture if you want without it cutting into or cutting out of your card. But in this case, I want it to cut out. So we've got a panel, and then I'm going to colour this up very, very lightly with some Distress Oxide ink and one of Tony's brushes here. I'm using Speckled Egg because I think it looks kind of old woody, and I think it tones really nicely with the yellows in there. So again, one pass through in the machine, it kind of embosses and cuts. Oh, it spat it back out at me the other way, so it hasn't quite cut that. Maybe it thinks it's too thick. Just going to try that again. Maybe I need to, there's an extra shim too much in here. Let's try it without that one. Try again. I thought it was weird that it came back out the front. Obviously got so far in and spat it back out, not liking it. While that's just going through, before we put everything onto the card, I've just got a 5x7 with some craft card and a plain white piece that we're just going to mat and layer on. There we go, I think that's worked this time. So I'm just going to pop that ready. So when I'm ready to put everything together and do the construction, I've got something, a base that I can just pop it straight on. Really need to go and have my nails done again as well before all the, I feel like all the salons, like the hairdressers and the nail shops and everything will shut again soon. So I'm going to try and go in next week, have a trim, get my nails done before we all look like crazy again over the winter. Right, so that's my card base ready. Let's have a look at this now, see if that's gone through. No, see, that's too little now. Let's try it. Might be just because this is a different combo of plates on the machine compared to mine at home. So of course you know what, when I cut this out a million times that on my desk I know exactly what the combo is. So just goes to show every machine is different. You have to play around a little bit. There we go. So I don't know whether you can see the texture there already, but then when we start adding on the ink with the blending brush, that's going to pop out even more then. So we've got embossing texture, we've got watercolour, we've got distress inks, and I can use this scrap piece. I like to just go over, make sure there's no excess on my brush. You see that texture and detail starting to pop out now? This is like a lovely bluey greeny colour. It's a very thirsty brush colour, I think. Can you see that starting to come out? There we go. See the knots and the embossed bits. To make that stand out even more, let's do a tiny little splash, because these are the oxide inks. They're water reactive. Leave it for a second and then blot. And that's just going to give us even more that kind of bleached wood effect. It's quite pale on the camera there, but actually in real life it looks like that kind of wood that you've left out in the summer or it's been by the beach. So now just a case of sticking everything together. So I'm going to pop the panel there. Let's do it. Have we got any foam? Yes, got a bit of foam tape here. Just to make that pop out. This is a kind of a bit of a gender neutrally kind of card and style, because there are plenty of female and male gardeners, aren't they? And you know, you could make this, if your granddad, for example, or husband is a real gardener, you could make this look even more male to suit their taste and see what they like to do in the garden. You could have the pots as well in the background, maybe in a different colour. Just before I stick down the watering can, it's important not to put any tape in over that hole where your flowers are going to stick in. And I personally, there's no right or wrong here, but I like to position my flowers in and secure those in place before sticking down. the watering can. Let me show you what I mean. So if I slip those through the opening now, peel back that tape, and I can kind of use that tape to hold them in place. So I kind of want it a little bit of an angle, and then have the leaves tucked behind. Kind of come out from the side. See what I mean? So you can always add a tiny bit of extra wet glue if you need. So I'm going to kind of have that. I've overlapped it slightly. Just a bit of glue to stick those down. And then these bits that layer on, it's up to you. You can have them sit flat like I'm going to do now, or you can put extra foam again. Kind of depends whether you're going to post and how much dimension you want. Because obviously it's just going to add a bit of thickness, but it looks good even when you just wet glue them down flat, because it's still adding some thickness. And you can kind of offset them slightly as well, just like 1/2 mil, like I'm doing here, just to give that 3D look even more. And then just as a final thing, so there's no glitter or sparkle or anything on this one, it's just very natural, gardeny looking, but something a bit different. Just pop that sentiment on its backing. But to look at that, and if you gave that to somebody, they would not guess in a million years that that was all just from a couple of white pieces of card. You know, you can do all the colour and the texture yourself on this, and it's just a really nice sense of achievement then, that it's not just papers and, you know, things like that, that you've created something completely from scratch. So I really hope you enjoyed that, and I've given you some tips with your watercolouring and mixing up textures as well, like the distress inks and the watercolours. I suppose technically it's mixed media if you put in multiple mediums on the same card, but it doesn't have that kind of grungy mixed media feeling. It's more still natural. It kind of fits with the style of the stamps and the dies, and I bet you'll have something already in your stash that you can do a similar kind of look. So as I say, hope you enjoyed that. Leave me a comment. I will be back with you on Thursday at 1 p.m. For live back here in the studio, and there'll be other uploads on my YouTube channel as well, Claire Manning Craft, in the meantime. And next week I will be showing you something new that's coming up very soon. So take care, have a great evening, and I will see you next time.